So let's go back a little bit, way back in time. I was once a 5-year-old kid who was so adventurous and pretty well controlled because that year before I was diagnosed with autism. But the moral of the story is not mental health. The moral of the story is that I am going to be talking to you about my very first PlayStation 2, which I still have to this day. We bought it at a thrift shop in the town of Vincent, Indiana. And I remember we were buying the very first Corvette game I ever had. Still have that to this day. And that Corvette game was a lot of fun. If you remember, you could drive the 2003 then recent Corvette with the 2 headlights that to me were absolutely amazing. And still, the graphics on that game are incredible. So when I got my first PS2, I was overjoyed because I had never seen anything like this. We were a poor family and still are a poor family to this very day, but the one thing I do value is that my mother tried as hard as she possibly could to get a good life for not only me, but for my sister as well. And being the oldest, we really struggled back then, so having a PS2 was like buying a PlayStation 5 for us. It was a really big ordeal. Plus, my mom played video games back in the day, was a big tomboy, and had a PS1 all throughout her life, but then had to get rid of it. And it sucks she had to even get rid of it, because you could play PS1 and PS2 games on the PlayStation 2. But then, when I progressed through more of my life, I remember sitting in my grandfather's chair, and he would be watching St. Louis Cardinals baseball games. But whenever I wanted to play my PlayStation, I had to interrupt his service to watch the baseball game in a season where they were going to win the World Series. I had to interrupt that, and then I would play my PlayStation 2 because I was just out there. I did this, I did that. I was running around all over the place, like a typical 5 or 6-year-old would probably do. That created to me a moment in my life where I began to love this one team that I was so young of remembering. But once I played MVP Baseball 2005 for the very first time as a 5 or 6-year-old, I remember having a blast with the game. And it's more than just the eye pitching, first-hand eye pitching. And it's a lot more than the mini games, and a lot more than the Dynasty mode where you could play up to 20 years. It's not that. There was one team I would always play in that game, and when I played with 2 controllers in my hand, I would always let this one team win. A year before this game was made, I remember playing what was, without a doubt, one of, if not the greatest baseball teams that I have ever seen play in my entire life. Not as a Cardinals fan, not just as an MVP baseball player, but just simply enjoying this team. This Cardinals team from 2004 and 2005 was the moment I got into baseball. The 2004 St. Louis Cardinals were a great symbol for a great childhood time I had to be alive. Full of future All-Stars, MVPs, and future Hall of Famers. This team went 105-57 to end the season off in the 2004 season. In 2005, they would continue their dominance. But this was, as I've said before, one of the greatest baseball teams I have ever watched in my entire life. It was the reason why I love the game of baseball. But this is more than just my love, because I don't want to be a narcissist here. Talking about my life, but I don't want it to deter from whatever the topic is that I'm talking about. But anyways, this is the story of the greatest baseball team that ever played the game of baseball. It was a childhood dream and a distant memory for many people in the baseball world. Here's the story of the team that changed my life and changed all of Midwest baseball fans' lives forever. The 2004-2005 St. Louis Cardinals. off, what made this team the best team in baseball? And you have to compare it more to the 1927 Yankees or even the 2016 Cubs, who I actually turned to be a fan of later. Sorry, St. Louis. But this entire team was loaded with talent across the board, was stacked with Hall of Famers, MVPs, and just some great players who even play on a video game. You had the lineup, and I remember it from my head: Jason Igzgrenhausen, Jim Edmonds, Albert Pujols, David Eckstein, Scott Rowland, Reggie Sanders, Yadier Molina, Edgar Renteria, Tony Womack, Larry Walker, Bo Hart, Mark Mulder, and even manager Tony La Russa. Man, I hate to be like this again. It's just, this team was absolutely loaded. I have books to this day about the St. Louis Cardinals. This team was just completely distant and off the radar. The team started its rebuild during the Mark McGwire home run chase in 1998 and had a lift to chance after chance of going all the way to the promised land, but falling short as soon as we got to the championship games. But 2004 and 2005 was a little bit different, because this Cardinals team was trying to avenge their wounds, and they were trying to heal them a little bit and keep a lineup that can build their way to the World Series year after year, as this rebuild would take from 1998 and end around 2007. Albert Pujols and then, yes, rookie Yadier Molina had an incredible season that year. Pujols had a team-high 46 home runs with a 657 slugging percentage and had 692 plate appearances. Molina, as a rookie, was an all-star catcher, but would become the catcher we know of today later in his career. He had a rocky start his freshman year, or his rookie year of sorts. But one thing that he could do was throw. And he got a lot of guys out that year, especially when it came down to the nitty-gritty. And in clutch time, he was a powerful hitter as well. The moral of the story was the reason why this team is the greatest team of all time in baseball history, even what nobody is talking about. Their records speak for themselves. This team finished with a record of 105 and 57 to finish off the 2004 campaign, finishing first in the NL Central, and then beating the Dodgers in the NLDS 3-1. And then, the moment I remember watching the NLCS that year, I was a very little kid sitting on my grandfather's lap, and I just heard him scream and yell as this home run got hit into right field, and the Cardinals would go on to Game 7.
Edmonds hit 42 home runs during the regular season. And we are going to Game 7 in the National League Championship Series.
They would end up winning that year's NLCS and conquering something no other Cardinals team has done before in that era, which they had tried. They got out of the NLCS, but now it's time to win the World Series. And what did they do against the Boston Red Sox? They fell apart.
Red Sox fans have longed to hear it. The Boston Red Sox are world champions.
They fell apart to the bloody sock of Curt Schilling and to the already pumped up and super excited incredible run of a comeback team in the Red Sox of Boston, who ended up winning that year's World Series, but were later ruined because of this movie, which I'll get to that later. I loved that movie as a kid. Now we get into the year 2005. The Cardinals still keep their same lineups from years before, but my goodness, they were still good. During that time period, had an even better comparable record that year compared to 2004, but eventually lost to the Houston Astros in the NLCS. The moment I knew the Cardinals were going to fall apart for the 2006 season was when guys such as Larry Walker and Reggie Sanders were eventually leaving the team. Scott Rowland still had an incredible career, but we didn't know of his future in St. Louis. And neither did we know about the future of Jen Edmonds on the team. But that 2006 squad ended up doing something even more incredible than the Red Sox did, and that was they go from a horrible record in the second or third place finish in the NL Central to end up finishing at the bottom of the NL Central to becoming one of the greatest Cinderella stories in all World Series history, eventually beating the Detroit Tigers in the World Series. This years-long rebuild that started in 1998 ended up carrying through to 2004 to 2006. After this moment, the Cardinals won one more World Series title, and that was in 2011. But let me tell you right now, the reason why I brought up and didn't get into much description about this baseball team was because this team defined my childhood. As a young kid from Indiana, growing up in middle of cornfields with a bunch of Cardinals fans around me, this moment ended up changing my life later because after my grandfather had passed away, I had to cheer for another team. And it was a personal choice, but I saw one team go from the other. I loved playing this team on MVP Baseball 2005. Still the greatest baseball game ever played. But this baseball team, because of their lineups, because of their hitting, because of their pitching, and just because of the childhood relevance, this team was amazing. It was amazing to see this Cardinals team at the old Busch Stadium. And then to carry that over to the new Busch Stadium was even more extraordinary. This again was the story of the 2004 St. Louis Cardinals, but this is a team that will go on for the end of time as one of the greatest to ever play the game. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. We need to thank you once again for growing this channel and continuing to subscribe. Also, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and other platforms. I also have a Newsbreak account where I update about current stories that occur in the Bloomington and Lagodi areas. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, stay blessed, and have a good one.